There is a couple in Minneapolis named Tom and Sarah. They have been together for 6 years, married for 3. He earns $74,000 as a logistics coordinator. She earns $68,000 as a middle school teacher. Their combined household income is $142,000, a figure that places them solidly in the top 25% of American households. They are not extravagant people. They do not take exotic vacations. They drive reasonable cars. They split their groceries and their Netflix password, and their arguments about the thermostat with the comfortable familiarity of two people who have genuinely built a life together. They have $11,400 in a joint savings account, $23,000 in Tom's 401k, $14,000 in Sarah's 403b, and $8,700 in credit card debt that has been there in some form since 2021. They cannot fully explain where the money goes. They have had the conversation about budgeting 4 times in 3 years. Each time, the conversation produces a spreadsheet that lasts about 6 weeks and then quietly lapses back into the status quo of two people managing money the way they managed it when they were single, now in the same house, now with larger shared bills, now with a mortgage payment that appeared in 2022 and reorganized every other financial number in their lives, without either of them consciously recalculating the updated total. On paper, $142,000 should feel like abundance. It feels like enough, mostly, with occasional stretches of tight. The math of 2 incomes, in practice, does not automatically produce the financial outcomes 2 incomes are supposed to produce. And the reason almost always traces back to the same source. 2 people who learn to manage money separately, merged their lives without merging their financial strategy, and have been navigating a joint financial life with 2 individual frameworks that were never designed to work together. The data on what actually happens to household finances when 2 people combine incomes is considerably less optimistic than the cultural narrative of the dual-income household suggests. A 2025 Fidelity Investments Couples and Money study found that 43% of couples in committed relationships report that money is a source of significant tension in their relationship, making it the single most common source of relationship conflict, above parenting disagreements, above work stress, above household responsibilities. A separate 2024 study by Ramsey Solutions found that among couples who report having regular money fights, 41% do not know what their partner earns, and 36% are unaware of a debt or financial account their partner carries. These are not couples who are hiding things from each other out of malice. They are couples who never built the financial infrastructure of a shared life because nobody in their social environment, their family history, or their cultural framework told them that the financial merger required by partnership is as active and deliberate a project as the emotional one, and that the failure to perform it produces financial outcomes that neither person would have accepted as an individual, while somehow accepting together as a couple. Here is the reframe that changes every conversation about money in a committed relationship. A dual-income household is not 2 single incomes living in the same house. It is a financial entity with a combined balance sheet, combined tax exposure, combined retirement trajectory, and combined risk profile that is either being managed as a unified system or being managed as 2 individual systems sharing fixed costs. And the financial difference between those 2 approaches, compounded across a working lifetime, is one of the largest and least discussed sources of wealth divergence between otherwise similar households. The couples who build wealth on combined incomes do not do so because they earn more. They do so because they figured out, deliberately or by accident, that 2 incomes pointing in the same direction is a categorically different financial instrument than 2 incomes coexisting in the same zip code. Let me show you exactly what that difference looks like when you trace it through 2 specific households across 20 years, because this is where the abstract principle becomes a number that changes how you think about every financial conversation you have ever avoided with a partner. Take 2 couples, both formed at 28, both with identical combined household incomes of $130,000, both in comparable metro areas, both with roughly equivalent starting financial positions. Call them the Marshalls and the Collinses. The Marshalls operate their finances the way most couples default to operating them. They have a joint account for shared bills, mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, into which each contributes an equal dollar amount monthly. The remainder of each person's paycheck stays in their individual accounts, managed according to each person's individual financial framework, which are different, which have never been explicitly compared, and which produce different savings rates, different investment approaches, and a persistent low-grade tension around money that neither of them would describe as serious, but that subtly shapes every major financial decision they make as a couple. They have never had an explicit conversation about their combined net worth, their combined retirement trajectory, or what financial independence looks like for their household as a unit, rather than two individuals. David Marshall contributes 8% to his 401k, because that is what felt right when he enrolled at 24, and he has never changed it. Alicia Marshall contributes 4% to her 403b, because her employer does not match above 4%, and she redirected what would have been additional contributions toward a car payment 3 years ago, and never redirected it back. Their combined household savings rate is approximately 9% of gross income. It will remain approximately 9% until one of them experiences a financial shock significant enough to force the conversation. The Collinses have a different operating model, arrived at not through financial sophistication, but through one uncomfortable conversation they had on a Saturday morning in year 2 of their marriage, when Ben Collins spread all their account statements on the kitchen table and said, quietly, that he did not think what they were doing was working, and that he wanted to try something different. They built a household financial plan from scratch as a unit. Combined income, combined expenses, combined savings target, combined retirement goal expressed as a specific portfolio balance at a specific age. They run their finances from a joint operating account into which both paychecks deposit, from which all household expenses are paid, and from which a fixed, automated transfer on the first of each month moves 19% of combined gross income into their investment accounts. His 401k maximized first for the employer match, then her 403b maximized for the match, then a joint Roth IRA, then a taxable brokerage account for anything above the tax-advantaged limits. They each maintain a small personal discretionary account, $400 per month each, for individual spending that requires no explanation or joint approval. Every other financial decision, the car purchase, the home renovation, the vacation, the insurance coverage, is evaluated against the household financial plan they built together and revisited every January. Now watch what happens to two identical incomes managed 2 different ways at 8% annual returns. The Marshalls, saving 9% of $130,000 in combined gross income, invest approximately $11,700 per year. Over 20 years, compounding at 8%, they accumulate approximately $573,000 in combined retirement and investment assets. The Collinses, saving 19% of the same $130,000, invest approximately $24,700 per year. Over the same 20 years at the same return, they accumulate approximately $1,209,000. The difference is $636,000. From the same income, in the same number of years, from nothing more dramatic than one uncomfortable Saturday morning conversation that produced a household savings rate double the one the default framework was producing. The financial advantage of operating as a unified system rather than two coexisting individuals is $636,000 over 20 years. It is $1.4 million over 30 years. It is the retirement difference between financial security and financial dependency, and it compounds from a conversation most couples have never explicitly had. The behavioral research on why couples default to the Marshall model rather than the Collins model points to 3 psychological dynamics that operate with unusual force in romantic relationships. The first is what researchers call financial identity protection. the tendency for individuals in relationships to maintain financial autonomy as a proxy for personal autonomy, driven by the accurate perception that financial dependence creates relationship vulnerability. This is a legitimate concern with a legitimate basis. The financial consequences of divorce or separation are severe and disproportionately impact the lower-earning partner. And the research on economic abuse within relationships, where financial control is used as a mechanism of power, documents real harm that financial independence protects against. The problem is that financial identity protection, applied as a blanket principle in relationships where it is not warranted by the specific dynamics, produces the Marshall model, two financial systems coexisting rather than one financial system operating, with the full cost of that fragmentation paid in foregone compounding across a working lifetime. The resolution is not surrendering financial identity into a merged system with no individual accounts or individual authority. It is what the Collinses built, a household financial entity with full transparency, shared direction, and individual discretionary space that preserves autonomy within an aligned framework. The second dynamic is what behavioral economists call money avoidance, the documented tendency to avoid financial discussions and financial information when those discussions or that information produce anxiety, guilt, or conflict. Money avoidance in couples operates as a mutual agreement, usually never explicitly stated, not to examine the financial reality of the household in sufficient depth to require a difficult conversation. The result is the conversation Tom and Sarah have not had. The one about why $142,000 per year still produces $8,700 in credit card debt. The one about what they actually want their financial life to look like at 55. The one about whether the mortgage they took in 2022 was sized correctly for the financial plan they share, rather than the financial plan neither of them has explicitly described. Money avoidance feels like peace. It produces, at the household level, the same outcome that individual financial avoidance produces, a gap between what the income could build and what the absence of management allows to dissipate. The third dynamic is financial value misalignment, the situation in which two people in a committed relationship have genuinely different beliefs about what money is for, different risk tolerances, different time horizons for gratification, and different hierarchies of financial priority that have never been made explicit to each other because neither of them has performed the self-examination required to make them explicit. The person who grew up in a household where financial instability was a recurring feature brings a different relationship to emergency fund sizing than the person who grew up in a household where money was consistently available and rarely discussed. The person who watched a parent work until 72 out of financial necessity brings a different urgency to early retirement savings than the person whose parents retired comfortably at 63. These differences are not character flaws. They are the specific outputs of formative financial experiences that shape money behavior with a consistency that rivals any other developmental influence. And they will express themselves in every major financial decision a couple makes, unless they are explicitly named, examined, and resolved into a shared framework. Unexamined financial value differences do not dissolve into harmony over time. They calcify into recurring arguments about specific financial decisions that are proxies for the underlying value conflict that has never been addressed directly. Do you and your partner, or you and any future partner, know each other's complete financial position right now? Not a vague sense of it, the actual number, combined net worth, combined debt, combined savings rate, combined retirement trajectory. Because the research on financial compatibility and relationship outcomes consistently shows that couples who have explicit knowledge of each other's complete financial position have significantly lower rates of financial conflict and significantly higher rates of joint wealth accumulation than couples operating on vague mutual assumptions. The most important financial document a couple can produce is not a budget. It is a combined balance sheet, built together, with everything on the table. And the most important conversation a couple can have about money is not about who pays for what. It is about what they are building toward. The practical framework for moving from the Marshall model to the Collins model does not require either person to surrender financial identity, give up individual spending discretion, or have every dollar accounted for in a joint ledger. It requires three specific structures that consistently produce better financial outcomes than the default coexistence model across every dataset that has studied couples' financial behavior. The first structure is the combined balance sheet, a single document built together, ideally once per quarter, that lists every asset and every liability in both names on a single page. Every bank account, every investment account, every retirement account, every loan, every credit card balance. The sum of assets minus the sum of liabilities is the household net worth. This number, one number, representing the combined financial position of the household as a unit, is the scoreboard that allows a couple to optimize toward a shared outcome rather than two parallel individual ones. Couples who track combined net worth together report significantly higher financial satisfaction and significantly higher savings rates than couples who do not, according to a 2024 Empower Financial Wellness study, independent of income level. The accountability is the mechanism. When you can see the number and you both own it, the decisions that would reduce it require justification against a shared standard, rather than individual preference. The second structure is the household savings rate target, a specific percentage of combined gross income that the household commits to investing, established by the couple together based on their actual combined retirement goal and actual combined timeline, not inherited from individual defaults set at first employment. The calculation is not complicated. Decide what combined portfolio value you want at what age. Back calculate the annual contribution required to reach it at 8% returns. Divide by combined gross income. The resulting percentage is your household savings rate target. If it is higher than your current combined savings rate, which it almost certainly is, because the default combined savings rate of couples using the Marshall model averages 8 to 12% nationally, while the savings rate required to fund a 25 times spending retirement portfolio in 30 years is 18 to 22%. Then you have a specific, calculable gap between where you are and where you need to be. And that gap is a better conversation starter than any budget category has ever been. The conversation is not about whether you spend too much at restaurants. The conversation is about the gap between your current savings rate and your required savings rate, and what the household wants to do about it. The third structure is the individual discretionary account, the specific protected space for individual financial autonomy that resolves the financial identity protection concern without sacrificing the alignment benefits of a unified household system. Each partner receives a fixed monthly amount, set by the household financial plan as the residual after savings, fixed costs, and joint variable expenses are funded, that deposits into their individual account, requires no accounting, justification, or discussion, and is theirs to allocate according to their individual priorities without any implication for the household financial plan. This structure does two things simultaneously. It eliminates the resentment that full financial merger produces in people with strong individual financial identities, and it eliminates the death by 1,000 small decisions drain on household resources that complete financial separation produces. The household is aligned. The individuals are free within it. The financial plan functions. The arguments about whether the $180 running shoes were really necessary stop happening because the question has no standing outside the individual discretionary account where the decision was made. Tom and Sarah are going to have the conversation eventually. Financial reality has a way of forcing the conversations that comfort keeps at arm's length. Through a tax return that produces a surprise liability, through a job loss that reveals the thinness of the shared cushion, through a retirement account statement that arrives during a quiet Sunday morning and raises a question neither of them has been ready to ask. The question, when it arrives, will not be about the credit card balance or the thermostat or the spreadsheet that lasted 6 weeks in 2022. It will be about what they are building together, and whether the way they are handling money is pointed at the same answer. That question is worth asking before the reality forces it. It is worth asking this weekend, at a kitchen table, with all the statements visible, not because financial planning is romantic, but because the alternative, two people on the same team pointing their financial resources in slightly different directions for 30 years, produces an outcome that neither of them would choose if they could see it clearly from the beginning. The Collinses had that conversation on a Saturday morning in year 2. The number that conversation eventually compounded to is $636,000 more than the number that the other model produced from identical inputs. Two incomes, pointed at the same target, managed as a unified system rather than two parallel ones, is one of the highest leverage financial structures available to any household at any income level. It requires one honest conversation, a combined balance sheet, a household savings rate target, and the specific protected space for individual autonomy that makes alignment feel like freedom rather than